Welcome to Maximize Mental Performance Naturally. I'm Dr. David DeRose, President of Compass Health Consulting, and your guide on this important journey to help you improve your cognition. I'm sure you've thought of it before. There's times when you wish you could think more clearly, have more mental vitality, have a sharper memory, do better in scholastic pursuits. All of those things are conceivably possible. How do we do it? Two basic game plans in this presentation. The first is to avoid key brain pitfalls, and the second is enhance overall brain function. We're going to look at natural, lifestyle-based strategies that can help you do both. And the good news is this: you don't have to make a decision about, wait, do I want to avoid problems with my brain, or do I want to focus on enhancing brain health? It's actually the same program. If you've joined us before for LifeStart seminars, it will come as no surprise to you that the key phrase to help you focus on 9 elements that can improve cognition is the very same one that helps us with a host of other problems. It's that phrase, LifeStart. If you're new to LifeStart, let me just bring you up to speed. The L stands for liquids. We'll talk about how various beverages can have a bearing on mental performance. Interpersonal relationships is the I, F stands for foods, and E is for exercise. Start, the second word in the LifeStart acronym, S for sunlight, T for temperance, air is the A, R for rest, and then T for trust in divine power. We'll look at some of these elements. We can't touch on all of them in this presentation, but we'll see how these natural strategies can help you do both things: avoid key brain pitfalls and improve brain function overall. Let's begin with one illustration of this, looking at the mental health area of depression. Depression is something that is sweeping the world. It's sweeping the United States. It is a major cause of suicides. It is affecting some 350 million people worldwide. If you have a depressive tendency, you are not unique. Each year, some 7% of U.S. adults experience a major depressive disorder. It is something that strikes people irregardless of their age. Individuals in their teen years, as many as 1 in 30 of them have experienced a seriously debilitating depressive disorder. The average age of onset, that means the first time a person has depression, in the early 30s. So you can see depression is really casting a giant shadow over folks in the United States and worldwide. Why it's so important is depression, or even having lesser levels of mental health impairment, could we say it that way? Just not functioning at the optimal mood can take a toll on your memory. We've known about this for a number of decades now, very conclusively. If you want to function at your best cognitively, your mood has to be at an even keel. You can't be depressed. You can't be overly hyped up. While we're speaking about depression, let me mention to you that the LifeStart paradigm, these 9 elements, are powerful in dealing with depression. We'll touch on some of them, but if you want more information, one of the best resources is Dr. Neil Nedley. He has a whole lifestyle-based approach to dealing with depression. I've also got a couple of simpler presentations that focus on enhancing brain health that you can get right on the LifeStart website. So these resources are there for you. And then if you want just some free material to help you get a better grip on the LifeStart acronym, how that works, what it all means, simply log into lifestartseminars.com and you could pick up our free ebook dealing with the LifeStart approach. Well, let's move on from that basic kind of overview of some of the things that we need to look at and look at how LifeStart can help us with a host of things that affect mental clarity. One of the areas, if you look across the entire population of the United States and beyond, one thing that's robbing people of cognitive function is stroke. Now, it's true, we usually think of stroke as something that occurs later in life, and it's true Stroke typically occurs in older individuals, but by older, stroke can happen at any age. There's all kinds of causes of stroke. There could be bleeding strokes. There can be strokes that occur from blockage in blood vessels, which typically happen after some time of living on a less than optimal lifestyle. But stroke is an important cause of mental health deterioration, and it is something that LifeStart can help us with. We're going to also see how LifeStart, this 9-step approach, can help us with high blood pressure and diabetes. And let's just pause for a little bit and speak about those conditions. High blood pressure itself, those higher blood pressure readings, can gradually take a toll on mental performance. So even if you're relatively young, you're listening to this, and your blood pressure is running high, this is something that is deleterious for optimal cognitive performance. On top of it, you don't want your blood pressure running really high because that's increasing your risk of stroke and other problems. The medications that you take for high blood pressure actually can take a toll on mental performance. Now, I know this seems like a bitter irony. What do you do if you have high blood pressure? If you don't treat it, that's likely to put you on a path that's going to rob you of cognitive function. And if you do treat it, the medications can impair mental performance. That's why one of our resources that we have is reversing hypertension naturally. We walk you through natural therapies that can help you get off your dependence on medication or decrease your dependence on those drugs and still get your blood pressure down. But the very principles that we'll be talking about in this presentation can go a long way to helping you be successful in that domain. I'll give you some of the things from that 3-hour series on reversing hypertension right now, so you can put them into practice right away. One other disease process that we need to mention, and that is diabetes. Diabetes also takes a toll on mental performance. And of course, diabetes hits people irrespective of age. There are children, of course, with type 1 diabetes, the classic juvenile onset diabetes. That's the terminology that we used to use. But now even type 2 diabetes, that we used to call adult onset diabetes, is knocking on the door of children, 5, 6, 8 years of age, being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The problem is, diabetes affects mental performance. As blood sugar goes up, that affects mental processes. And on top of that, hypoglycemia, low blood sugars that often occur in the context of diabetes treatment, can take long-term tolls on mental performance. The bottom line is simple. You want to avoid high blood pressure. You want to avoid diabetes. How do you do it? Lifestyle therapies. LifeStart is the key, and if that's not enough for you to just take it and run with it, this presentation, we also have resources on diabetes for you. So all of these things, we're trying to put them in your hands so you can have optimal quality of life and longevity, and in this case, how you can maximize mental performance. Let's talk about some specific things you can do that overlap across those categories, helping you with mental health, helping you decrease your risk of stroke, helping you with high blood pressure and diabetes. Here's one of them: drink more water. That's right. It has far-reaching benefits. Let me give you an example. A 2004 study was looking at individuals who had either had stroke or a warning sign of stroke called a transient ischemic attack, often abbreviated TIA. These individuals were compared with healthy people to see whether there were any differences between the individuals who had evidence of brain blood vessel blockage and those who didn't. What did they find? They found that one of the primary causes, or one of the primary linkages more precisely, was with poor blood fluidity. They did a number of measurements that showed that those who had less fluid blood, we call it worse hemorrheology, had more problems with mental health issues actually being driven by stroke. So we're not just speaking about, depression or other mental health diagnoses. We're speaking about actually having a stroke or a warning sign of it, and it was linked to poor blood fluidity or poor hemorrheology. Some of you have heard me speak on this topic. I have a series called Longevity Plus, And Longevity Plus speaks about the science of hemorrheology. If you've seen that presentation, you know that one of the things I advocate is drinking more water. Even if you never heard me talk about it before, you're hearing me right now, right? Drink more water. It is a powerful aid to improving mental clarity through improving blood supply, improving blood fluidity. It directly can help mental clarity. If your brain is kind of foggy, drink more water, but it's having this direct effect as well in decreasing your risk of stroke. What about other relationships between water drinking, this important fluid or liquid, that's the L in LifeStart? Is there anything else that would indicate an improvement in cognition? Well, it's very interesting. If you just look at a measurement called plasma viscosity, this is another indicator of blood fluidity. The better your viscosity, in other words, the more like water your blood is, the better your cognitive function. This has actually been documented. So again, it's just a message. Don't let yourself get dehydrated. Keep well hydrated by drinking plenty of water. That's one of the ways that LifeStart contributes to this whole area of maximizing mental performance. Let me give you one other bonus. I share it in my series on Longevity Plus, but I'll tell you right here. There's another aspect to the LifeStart paradigm that many people miss. It's that last T. It has to do with trust and divine power, having relationships with other people, trusting relationships with other people, and with a power beyond yourself. Think about it this way. One of the things we all have that many of us can share with other people is our own blood. Did you know that donating blood actually has been shown for many people to improve mental clarity? That's right. Fascinating topic, but donating blood for many Americans actually will help with cognition. Well, we need to move on and just highlight one other area that has to do with liquids because it also interfaces with another LifeStart element, and that is the T in LifeStart, the first T. In the word start, there's sunlight, then there's temperance, and then there's that last T that we were just speaking about, trust. The first T stands for temperance. That means avoiding things completely that are harmful and using things that are good in moderation. One of the beverages, as far as mental performance, that actually is surprisingly not your friend is caffeine. Now, I know some of you are saying, now, wait a minute, Dr. DeRose, you're going too far because caffeine helps me perform better. It is true. If you're really tired, something that ramps up the stress hormones, by the way, that's how caffeine works. It ramps up your stress hormones. It will improve your mental clarity. There's no question about that. But caffeine has problems with it that actually impair cognition and impair optimal brain performance. For example, you will be more likely to make mistakes. That's right, make more mistakes if you're using caffeine. This was shown in classic research years ago when they look at typists. Those typists could type faster under the influence of caffeine, but they made more errors. Caffeine has other problems as well. Caffeine is a stimulant, and because of that, it actually can increase what we call sleep latency or lengthen sleep latency. That means it can make it more difficult to fall asleep. The LifeStart paradigm includes the letter R, which stands for rest. Rest is very important for optimal brain functioning, and it is critical for memory. I know I'm taking a little bit of an aside from liquids, but I'm trying to help you see how all of these things interrelate. These 9 LifeStart elements can help you maximize mental performance. And right now is a great place to reason. I'm concerned about why we use caffeine so much as a population. And it's because we're cutting ourselves short on sleep. So the very need for caffeine is often indicating that you are putting yourself at a cognitive disadvantage. You're trying to compensate for it with caffeine, but it's really not ideal at all. Some of you may realize, too, that there's an intimate connection between caffeine and nicotine use. We know that tobacco smoking is another cognitive health robber. It is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. And by the way, both caffeine and nicotine have vasostimulatory properties. What this means is you take some caffeine in the case of caffeine, and it causes your blood vessels to constrict. That can actually decrease blood flow to the brain. So although caffeine is ramping up stress hormones, may make you feel stimulated, it's got some downsides that really do not optimize cognitive performance. Let me move on now to talk about some of the other LifeStart elements. You're probably wondering about foods. Do dietary choices have a bearing on mental health? The answer is an overwhelming yes, no question at all about it. Fascinating study actually released at the American Heart Association meetings, looked at over 1,000 healthy individuals that had never been diagnosed with cardiovascular disease, no heart disease in these individuals. What was so fascinating to me is they were looking at memory. And specifically what they were looking at is they were looking at a connection between food choices and memory. What these researchers found, these UC San Diego researchers, they found something amazing. Trans fats. The individuals that ate more of those trans fats did worse on memory tests. Most of you know that trans fats are found in partially hydrogenated vegetable oils, those common ingredients of yesteryear. I say of yesteryear because most companies are phasing those out, and even government organizations are trying to help us get rid of these from the American diet. They are so deleterious. But trans fat consumption, if you see partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, you want to steer clear of it if you're interested in maximizing cognitive performance. But the good news is there are some fats that are actually beneficial for the brain. They can decrease your risk of stroke. Remember we talked about that? This same type of fat can lower blood pressure. This same type of fat can decrease your risk of depression. What are we talking about? We're talking about the omega-3 fats. This is a form of so-called polyunsaturated fat. It is a fat that is very liquid at room temperature. And think about it. Now, I mean, this may sound like a stupid question, but what temperature do you live at usually? Room temperature, right? Here's the point I'm trying to make. Your nerve cells, the membranes of your nerve cells are at room temperature. 98.6, you say, oh, it's a little bit warmer than room temperature. Okay. But those nerve cells, if their membranes are made up of polyunsaturated fats, omega-3 fats, for example, and in particular omega-3 fats, they are more fluid. The brain messengers, known as neurotransmitters, work better. This is in contradistinction to a diet that is high in trans fats or saturated fats, the animal fats. What those fats are, they're more rigid. And so when you look at butter, what is butter at room temperature? It's solid. It's largely saturated fat. What are trans fats at room temperature? They're largely solid. And so they make the membranes more rigid, and membranes don't work as well when they're rigid. So if you want to improve cognitive function, you want to focus on plant sources of nutrition, on plant fats. You want to avoid the animal fats. You want to avoid the partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. It will decrease your risk of stroke. It will decrease your likelihood of depression. You say, okay, Dr. DeRose, you convinced me. I'm going right to the fish market and get that omega-3 fat. Let me tell you the good news, especially for those of you that are not fish lovers, or for those of you that are concerned about the environment. If you haven't heard, there's not enough fish in the world for us to get enough omega-3 fats as a world population by eating fish. We need to get it from the same place the fish got it. Yeah, fish don't make omega-3 fat. You know where they get it from? They get it from plants. Plants are the only thing in nature that actually make omega-3 fat. So choose rich sources of omega-3 fat from plant sources like flax seeds and, you know, a great source? Walnuts. You know, some have pointed out, they said, you know, walnuts look like a brain. You ever noticed that? They're really good for your brain health because they're a rich source of omega-3 fat. Well, we need to hasten on to some of those other LifeStart elements. We've talked about fat, we've talked about liquids, we've talked about things that impact on temperance and trust, but I want to tell you just a little bit more because it's about a very interesting relationship that is often lost on many people, and it's the relationship between stress and cognitive performance. It kind of brings us back to this discussion about caffeine, because remember, caffeine works by ramping up stress hormones. Is stress good or bad for cognitive performance? Again, just like the scenario with caffeine, if you're fatigued, if you're drowsy, if you're about to fall asleep, well, listen, you're not going to have very good cognitive functioning. And it's true that stress will arouse you, it will improve your level of alertness, and it will have some cognitive benefits. So again, I'm not saying you can never use caffeine. It will never do anything good for you. Now, I personally, just for the record, if I've said anything that is confusing, I do not use caffeine at all, because I just think it is not worth the cost. I can improve my cognitive function in other ways. If I'm tired, I can go for a walk and wake myself up. I can take a cool shower, or better yet, if I'm that tired, I probably need to go to sleep. But here's where I'm going with stress. Is stress beneficial or deleterious for mental performance? Yes, it can have some short-term benefit, but if we're ramping up our stress hormones, you've probably seen this before, you get all stressed out and you cannot engage in higher level mental processing. I mean, I know it as a writer. If I'm trying to write and I'm so focused on the deadline looming over me, it just shuts me down. I have to just say, hey, I'm going to write as much as I can. I know I've got a limited time, but if I get all stressed out about a deadline or other things going on, forget it. Forget it. I mean, I even knew that as a student. When I was in medical school, if I looked at all the stuff I had to learn, I'd say, oh my, how could I ever learn all that stuff? And what would happen? I'd get so stressed out I couldn't learn anything. I just had to say, hey, I got an hour right now. I'm going to study what I can, and I'm not going to get all worried about it. So stress control is very important when it comes to optimal cognitive performance. Now, while we're speaking about all these important things, I promised you something, and before we go further on the stress path, I want to tie in something else that's related to stress, and that is high blood pressure. High blood pressure, in and of itself, just with stress, you can ramp up that blood pressure significantly. In fact, I was just talking with someone the other day, and they couldn't understand why their blood pressure had gone up. I mean, it was up over 200. They were on medication. Their blood pressure didn't run that high. It turned out they were under a lot of stress that particular day. And just calming down. When they were in the doctor's office, they rushed off to see the doctor, rightly so, with a pressure of like 210 systolic and I think over 100 diastolic, which is very high. The doctor just had the person sit down, just relax. And that blood pressure came down 30 or 40 points just by relaxing. But here's the other connection I wanted to make. I promised you that I'd tell you something about high blood pressure and diet without having to rush off and get my series on reversing hypertension naturally. Here's the bonus point I want to give you. And that is those same omega-3 fats we've been talking about that help with depression, decrease stress risk, they actually decrease. They decrease your risk of having high blood pressure. Research shows that when you choose more plant fats, they are actually protective of blood pressure problems. So optimize your intake of good sources of fat. It will help your blood pressure as well. There's that bonus insight I wanted to share with you because it ties in with stress as well. If you want your blood pressure to be more stable in the face of stress, choose other healthy lifestyle practices as well. So now back to stress. We want you to help have some tools to control stress so you can optimize your brain functioning. I was just looking at a very interesting medical research study the other day, and they were inducing stress in people and then measuring certain outcomes. Would you believe how they were inducing stress? They were actually having them watch videos that were stressful. Interesting, isn't it? Do you know that much of what people watch on the internet, much of what they watch on television, much of the viewing fare that they consume is actually stress-inducing? It ramps stress hormones up. Think about that very carefully, what you put in your mind. But the good news is simply this: no matter what is causing stress in your life, you can make some lifestyle choices that can help your brain deal with stress and thus improve mental clarity and cognitive performance. How do you do it? It actually brings us back to food, because the food choices we engage in and the practice of temperance, eating at the right times and not at the wrong times, actually can give you some powerful boost to mental performance. Here's the secret. There are two compounds that are used to make many neurotransmitters: tryptophan and tyrosine. These two compounds are called amino acids. The tryptophan is used to make serotonin, which is a brain calming chemical. Helps deal with depression, for example. The tyrosine is used to build other brain transmitters like dopamine. Why are these so important? Both tryptophan and tyrosine and the neurotransmitters that are made from them can help you deal more effectively with stress. Well, how do you get more tryptophan and tyrosine to your brain? You do it by doing things like eating a good breakfast. And what a good breakfast looks like when it comes to these neurotransmitters is eating a carbohydrate-rich diet, eating lots of fruits, whole grains. Do you get the picture? Shy away from those heavy protein choices, and you will find that you get more tryptophan and tyrosine to the brain. Well, our time has just about slipped away from us, but I think you've caught the picture. LifeStart is something that offers you help in improving cognitive performance. If you haven't resonated with some of the material we've shared, you can dive into it more through our free study guides. They're available at LifeStartSeminars.com. You can also get personalized help. We have coaching opportunities for you at LifeStartSeminars.com. And even more good news, all kinds of free resources that you can take advantage of. I'm Dr. David DeRose. Hopefully the material we've shared with you will help you optimize your cognitive performances. All you've got to do is take hold of it and go forward.